It's uh, it's funny because I get embarrassed by things like that, but it is nice to know that um, we're on each other's team, right? Isn't that what it's really about? Oh, is it not? Hello, hello. Yeah, better, maybe. It is nice to know that we not only have a team, but it's a systemic family, and so we're not only playing baseball, we're playing on a company team that we're all not that great at it, but we're having a great time, and we're lucky to hit it past first base, but I'm okay with that. I do like baseball and softball, really, when we're old. We don't do baseball, we do softball when we're old. No, it's really fun, and there has been a really amazing transition from 2006 to now, because in 2006, I sat in front of anybody here in 2006 at the Sunshine? Sunshine 2006, raise your hands. Wow, that's where I introduced nutrigenetics, nutrigenomics. My first talk to you all who were here, the 5 of you, I introduced the concept of MORS, and it was the MTHFR work that had started that. Hey, Nicole, will you close that back door? Oh, she's getting it. Moving from methylation into redox, it's really an easy transition because they're connected. In order to have any or many enzymatic reactions, especially those that make ATP or DNA or the like, require a redox reaction. When you guys think of redox reactions, what do you guys think of? I know that's a crazy question. This is seriously tough questions. Anybody want to throw something out there at me? What do you guys think of when you think of a redox reaction? Balancing, what else? Is there any reactions that you would consider in your mind as redox when you antioxidants? That's a really good way to start. What's an antioxidant? Where is it? What's it? List an antioxidant for me. Glutathione's one. Anybody else got one? Vitamin C, big one. E, another big one. These are antioxidants. What have you guys ever sat down again when you're bored at night and said, what is an antioxidant? What does it do? What does it actually do? I know I've been told for 20 years to eat them, right? And for a while there, every food had an antioxidant rating. Do you guys remember that? An ORAC. Everything's ORAC. That was half marketing, by the way. That wasn't just for your benefit, that was for the marketer's benefit. A redox reaction, you wouldn't be alive without them. The planet wouldn't be alive without them. Photosynthesis is a redox reaction in plants. The making of ATP is a redox reaction. The making of your methyl groups, DNA, getting rid of glucose, if you're in ketosis, catabolizing fats into ketones and so on. That's all redox reactions, every one of them. And in order to do those reactions, you have to have your minerals, your vitamins, your enzymes, and the direction of the body of the cells, along with some herb components, right? We've talked about the idea of, I wanted to give you guys a little piece that kind of links these two. So how many of you here have heard of ketosis? Getting into ketosis. How many of you here have been in ketosis before? Quite a few of you, maybe? How do we get into ketosis? What become this staple of our diet? Fats, what else? Proteins. Do you guys know, anybody in here want to venture out, what carries, when you're metabolizing fats, what are one of the essential nutrients that helps brings fat across a membrane so that it can be utilized and turned into ATP? I already said it earlier in the talk. It's one of the top ones that we use for methylation. It consumes our methylation if we have to make it from scratch. No? You guys have heard of carnitine? Carnitine is used to bring, acetyl-L-carnitine brings fats across to be utilized, turned into energy. So if you're in ketosis, you ought to be supplementing carnitine, because when you're metabolizing nothing but fats, you're depleting carnitine, which means you're making carnitine, which means you're using up a lot of methylation. So it's one of those areas that methylation is now crossed into metabolism, right? You're going to want to methylate while you're in ketosis. Otherwise, you're going to deplete methyl groups because of the diet choices you've made. So in order to, and that's actually why some people, by the way, now they're saying, some researchers are saying some people that can't get into ketosis, if you add carnitine to their world, that could change. They may now get into ketosis. They just don't have enough carnitine to shift that, to make that shift in their body, in their cells. So now we bridge the gap. We're talking about, we went from methylation to metabolism or redox reactions. Redox reactions are, of course, amazing. They allow you to make everything in the world that you need. And they also protect you from everything in the world you're making. We've all heard, what is the most oxidative organelle? Organelle means it's inside the cell, or you could even say organ, I don't care, you can guess. What is the most oxidative organelle in the body? Say it louder. Endoplasmic reticulum and mitochondria. They both, one is making ATP using redox reactions, and one is consuming most of your ATP to generate other things like lipid metabolism and creating of a lot of other things. So you got high amounts of oxidative reductive processes. Does your body know that that's happening? Your body produces enzymes that we can supplement. What's an enzyme that we use or a compound that we use inside the cell to protect us from redox or oxidative dangers or reductive dangers? SOD, that's one of them. Superoxide dismutase, catalase, glutathione. Now, glutathione, do you think glutathione runs around by itself and acts in the world? I mean, glutathione, let's imagine, glutathione is like, let's think about this. Glutathione by itself is like a battery. A battery can act on its own, but it's much better when it's inside of something that it's powering, right? There are a number of enzymes that are powered by glutathione. I don't know if you guys knew that. There's glutathione reductases, there's glutathione transferases, there's glutathione oxidases, and so on and so forth. There's a number of enzymes that use glutathione to keep you healthy. Glutathione by itself, as a battery, it could cruise around in your bloodstream and help you with a redox reaction. If there's an oxidative free radical and it happens to bump into it, absolutely. More often than not, though, it's used by an enzyme to keep you healthy. That's what glutathione does. And these are redox reactions that glutathione is helping. To take a step back further, and I know we're going deep into the cell, but when you make ATP, when we think about making ATP, what are the three primary ingredients to making ATP? And you guys all know ATP is the lifeblood of energy, right? It is your electricity inside your body. It's what keeps you alive. And every time you blink, every time you do anything, you burn ATP. The three ingredients, one, a carbon source. It can be a ketone, it can be a fat, it can be a sugar. That's first. Followed by water. Followed by what? Oxygen. And which one's the most important of those three ingredients? Oxygen. How long can you live without oxygen? A couple minutes? If you're good, maybe 4 or 5 minutes. You guys seen those free divers that can go down to 500 feet on one breath of air? They can live, about up to 10 minutes maybe without a breath. Next is water. How long can you live without water? For a while, right? A week, sometimes 2, maybe. If in the worst case scenario, they're usually drinking pee and stuff. And then food. You can live a lot longer without food. That priority illuminates the idea of redox reactions. Oxygen is critical. What is oxygen? It's an oxidative molecule. It creates an oxidative environment. By definition, you are oxidative. Your body is highly oxidative, which can lead to a number of problems, correct? Like aging, like diseases, like a lot of other things, because you're oxidative. So you've developed a number of tools, and you have a number of tools given to you in your genetics and so on to reduce the oxidative stress through what we call redox. That's reduction oxidation. It's a balance. Everything's a balance. So you have all these tools on the other side of the equation to help you with oxidation. Many of those are called antioxidants. That's the plant world that bring up antioxidants. So why do we care about redox reactions? Well, I chose this one because I can parlay methylation into this, but I chose this to talk about because, again, it's in every facet of health. It affects your microbiome. It affects your skin aging. It affects your cognitive function. It affects your heart. What is heart disease, essentially? What is cardiovascular disease? As defined by the medical associations. You might have a different, more specific, valuable interpretation, but what is their definition of heart disease? Plaque, arteriosclerosis. What is that? That's oxidative damage in your arteries, period. You get small LDL compounds that are oxidized, by the way. They impact into the tissue. Once they impact, they embed themselves at the tight junction. They then further oxidize, which recruits your immune system. It also recruits things like proteases and other things that trigger more oxidative damage, and it becomes this really vicious cycle. And if you guys have ever watched an open heart surgery on people that have had that, it's terrible. Have you guys ever seen that, the bypasses? It's amazing that that actually happens inside of you. And it's happening to younger and younger people. It's happening to people in their 40s. Healthy people, the widowmaker, right? Guys running down the street, generally men, and they kill over at age 40. They were running half marathons at the time. It's a different process. It's a redox problem. It's not a health problem. It's a problem with their redox system as it appeals to things like LDLs and HDLs and what they're carrying in your body. Also with things like homocysteine and ADMA, which is asymmetric dimethylarginine. These all trigger redoxes that aren't balanced. So if your body isn't balancing redox because you're eating terribly or your job is stressful or you have a toxic environment because you live in the middle of LA, how do we counteract that? We have nature to counteract it with things like antioxidants, things like glutathione, stimulating genetics. Plants will stimulate the genes like SOD. We use plants that actually turn SOD on, turn catalase on, turn some of the other genes on that help you balance this redox potential. But if you're not actively doing it, it can overwhelm your body. Your body isn't always sensitive enough to overcome a poor redox potential. Hence, heart disease in that case, right? And I'm oversimplifying. There's other ways you can get it, but that's an oversimplification. But clearly, at the site of the sclerosis, it's a pretty nasty redox situation is what happens. And that triggers a lot going on in the body regarding these other things. Yes?
One of the biggest causes of that oxidative process is atypical bacteria. Now, a lot of people don't talk about this, but we actually get an infection from mycoplasma, mycobacteria, ureaplasma, different things, and it gets into the intima of these blood vessels and causes oxidative stress, and then our body comes by and lays down the plaque and everything. So not only do we need to get rid of all the oxidative stress, we need to get rid of the core cause, which is the mycobacteria, because everybody gets a high CRP, C-reactive protein, and they can even check that for a cardio C-reactive protein, and it is mycoplasma that usually causes it. And mycoplasma has a little enzyme in it, so if they drop it on us, it can actually get into our body through the lungs because it gets into the bloodstream, then it loves the intima of the blood vessels and causes the arteriosclerosis. Treatment. 3, 4, and 5 together kills mycoplasma. The 3 and 4 is really good antibacterial, anti-staph, anti-strep, but you have to add the 5 to get it into the cell because mycoplasma is what they call an obligate anaerobic bacteria that gets into the cells. So to get the 3 and 4 into the cells, you use the number 5.
Thank you.
As part of that, one of the challenges we have regarding, we're coming at this at a nutritive angle. There's always the microbiological angle, and there's also a viral angle. You didn't bring that up, but I want to say that typically speaking, when you have a systemic infection, you're now triggering what are considered the virome, and these are enteric viruses. You guys are familiar seeing them in blood work like Epstein-Barr, HHV 6, 7, 5. Have you guys heard of HHV, the herpes virus simplexes? They're not all the sexually transmitted ones, by the way, but they tend to rise and start to become active during cases of inflammation. So if a mycobacterium or a proteozoa or something triggers this inflammation, either in an artery or in a liver or in a tissue, you'll find that you're going to get essentially a comorbid viral impact. And that's why a lot of these people, we had this in my own family, where it was triggered by a bacterial, but in the end, when they solved that through the protocol, the viral persisted, and the viral persisted for months. And it gave them feelings of fibromyalgia and what's the other? Just feeling extremely exhausted all the time. Chronic fatigue, thank you. That's what I was trying to say, chronic fatigue. And that persisted for a very long time. So we're getting more and more, our knowledge of our bodies and our knowledge of the world around us is showing us more what's going on. It doesn't necessarily make people happy or immediately because they're still going through it themselves. But at least we're seeing that the bacteria can trigger a later onset of viral issues. And that's kind of a new way of thinking. Those of you that work in the Lyme world probably experience that more than anybody, I would imagine. That seems to be where the knowledge base from that came from that world, because they were looking so deeply, these patients that were suffering for years, they learned that there was this progression that would happen in that world. And then it would all of a sudden, when they're doing better, it would all of a sudden start over again, occasionally, based on a different trigger, an emotional trigger. They get divorced or something. All of a sudden, they're back in this chronic fatigue, myalgias, and so on again. But all the tests are showing that, of course, Lyme is gone. It's other viruses that are reemerging. Most of us don't really experience that. Epstein-Barr, mono, right? Everybody here in this room, I would imagine, I don't think anybody except for maybe a little guy back there would test positive for Epstein-Barr. And yet, most of you didn't exhibit symptoms because you're relatively healthy. And until you have another triggering event, Epstein-Barr is kept in check by your immune system. And that's typically what happens until there's another event that exposes your immune system, and now you're in trouble. So in terms of redox, every single thing, like Dr. Warner said, and everything you guys are working with, all of these things from toxins, just like with our methylation talk, toxins, bacteria, fungus, parasites, poor diet, etc., can trigger a redox problem. Because again, they're found in every cell. Every cell is doing its best to maintain balance. And if you have an insult, whether it be a plastic that gets into your cells or a bacterium that gets in there, etc., they're going to shift the balance of redox. Today, what I'm talking about is redox in isolation, but I want you to remember that you can apply this information into something like a bacterial issue or an injury, a brain injury, or whatever it may be. You take this and apply it to the greater protocol. Does that make sense? This is the mini protocol related just to redox. You can apply this to a larger protocol that is dealing with the whole body, that person you're dealing with, their whole body. I want to make that caveat. It's true for methylation. It's true for redox potentials. We're working on a particular element that'll help you work on another world, like their adrenal or their cognitive or their infertility, whatever it may be. Infertility comes into play now, right? That's got both a microbiome component and a redox component among what we always used to know, and that's the endocrine component, right? We'd always focus on the endocrine, but clearly there's a microbiome and a redox potential there. It's not a microbiome talk. I was tempted to go into microbiome. That's always my temptation. Don't do it. Don't do it. Okay, so there is a connection. And again, on that app, when you pull up my stuff, there is a slide on there that you can check out. We'll get to that in a second. That you can look at. This breaks it down in a little more detail. I'll talk about this in a minute, but it's on your app. You can download it, print it if you want. It's the only one I have on there that really kind of delves into some of our redox potentials. But there are some tests you can do. I didn't even think of there's C-reactive proteins. There's other damaging tests you can do in the blood that are really standard. If you go and get a blood test, or if your patient has already had a blood test, it should be on there. These are standard protocol nowadays for everything. They're not always terribly informative, but they give you something. They can give you something about that. So, what are some of the ways we look at the redox potential issues? Like methylation, we look at chemosensitivity, mold sensitivity. These are aflatoxins, by the way. Digestive issues, hormonal issues. Why am I highlighting, again, these very generic or global issues that we all face? I could even say cognitive issues. The memory loss. You walk into a room, you're talking to somebody, you're all excited, blah, blah, blah. And you walk into the other room and you go, why did I come in here? Right? That's redox in some cases because you're firing too fast, but you're not storing those memories, or you're not keeping track of things. And you see that as you get older and older too, by the way. You can reverse some of that. It's not too difficult to do. So you can reverse a lot of it. There's some testing available, and I'm hoping that I get done a little earlier so we can dialogue back and forth, and you guys can throw in there, like Scott did. There's other things I'm sure you guys do regarding redox that I have not listed here. I've only just done a really short list just to prime the pump and get you guys excited. We can look at glutathione. There's various glutathione tests we can run, like it's straight. We can look at 5-oxyproline. Back to the methylation. What's another methylation test that is also related to redox? I told you about homocysteine, which gives you the homocysteine pathway to make methionine, right? High homocysteine gives you an indicator of methylation issues. But there's another one in the methyladenosylcobalamin. So the adenosylcobalamin world, that cofactor is used to make energy molecules. When it's not working, succinyl-CoA is what it makes. When it's not working, what's a byproduct in the bloodstream that goes way up, or in the urine? Methylmalonic acid. Have you guys heard of that? That leads to two indicators. One, your methylation isn't working well, and it's adenosylcobalamin that's involved in that one. Two, your redox reactions may not be working very well. In both cases, methylmalonic acid. And it's something you can get just like these. It's standard these days. It's very standard. If you order a panel, you're going to get most of those right out the gate. Now, if you don't do this kind of testing, there's a lot of other ways to get to this. It impacts methylation, your detoxification. Now, in redox, how do we see redox reactions physically? What are some of the ways you guys look for and please include something like, if you muscle test by asking certain questions. Feedback. What do you guys look for someone where you may suspect redox? Another way to put that is you suspect oxidative stress. Okay, redox, when I say redox reactions, I'm implying oxidative stress or oxidative damage. So if you guys are looking at something, how do you pick out oxidative damage or oxidative stress when you're with a client? Low energy? Pain? Foggy? Foggy thinking? Sleeping. That's a good one. If their sleep cycles are wrecked, you're clearly in oxidative stress. Clearly. There's no question. Anybody else? What are some other things you guys do to tease out oxidative stress in a patient? Without running tests. These tests, anyway. There's other ways to do it, right? What if you can look at physiological, metabolic, their metabolism's off. If they're struggling with weight, if they're struggling with skin issues. Yeah, the cognitive decline, neurologic is for sure, yeah. Anything else you guys might want to throw out there those are all good answers, and those all give you a sense of if they're struggling in these ways, if they're struggling in metabolic ways, I don't care how you assess it, whether it's through your intuitive or if they're struggling in these ways, redox potential is going to be out of balance. Why? Because it's one of the easiest ones to get out of balance. It's easy for redox to fall out of balance, just like methylation can fall out fairly easily. Which is why I went there today, because redox can fall out of balance through a lot of ways. Any chemical exposure can throw off some of your redox. Now, the microbiological aspect also can throw off. So any infection, any inflammation can throw off the redox. Now, it can be localized, but also could be systemic. And those are easy. Someone mentioned pain. If you have articular pain, if you have kidney pain, or your liver area is in pain, that's a localized issue. And likely there is a redox potential there, because anytime you have inflammation, you're affecting your redox potential. End of story. Just think of it that way. It makes it easy. Any one of these happens, you're affecting redox potential in a negative way. Because when you're in balance, redox is in balance, you're going to feel great. Low glutathione impacts methylation, detox, redox, fatigue, cellular metabolism. I can't emphasize that enough. So I focused on glutathione. There are a number of antioxidants. I'll just get to my protocol so we can start playing with it. There's a number of ways that I worry about our redox potential. Glutathione is the first. Why? Because it is the most ubiquitous antioxidant in the body. And it works by itself in some cases, but more often than not, perhaps more often than we even know, it is used by, like a battery, other tools. And these other tools maintain healthy DNA, healthy cellular membranes, healthy receptors, healthy redox reactions in the mitochondria, healthy redox reactions in the endoplasmic reticulum. The ER in the mitochondria is full of the enzymes and the glutathione and the precursors for all those things, like N-acetylcysteine. These are areas where redox is important, because when it goes wrong very badly for those people. It can lead to a lot of the symptoms you see in the end game. But it also gives us a chance to really reverse those things pretty quickly with the right thinking. So G-cell, glutathione only. Glutathione centric, glutathione focused. I want to tell you one more thing about this formula. About a year ago, we did a small clinical. I'm going to call it a clinical observational study, because it was blinded, it was double blinded, but it lacked some of the other elements of a full double-blind placebo-controlled, and it also had a placebo, but it lacked some of those elements because we were simply looking at blood levels. So it was more observational. We gave different groups different pills, and then we measured their blood. So we didn't have we weren't trying to work on any symptomology or anything on the outcome. We were just looking at blood levels. And what we found was a few shocking things. One, of course, in anybody's blood and urine, you can find glutathione, right? It's being made by you all the time, so it's always there. The next thing we found is we tried things like acetylglutathione and liposomal glutathione, and we didn't see an increase. So we went back to the literature and thought, what's going on here? And we found two different stories, two publications. One was, if you eat glutathione, most of it's destroyed in the GI. And this publication, and I can only find one, where they literally dosed the people in the study with 3 grams of glutathione. That's a lot, is it not? 3 grams from a capsule standpoint is going to be 6 capsules, right? 2 capsules per gram of solid glutathione. And then we found another couple of studies that said, no, when we were dosing glutathione regularly, we started to see increases. So we took all those same people that had already been getting their blood drawn from us, and we tortured them longer. We decided to say, oh, hey guys, let's high dose and let's constant dose. And what we found was, on the high dose, we couldn't see it, but a constant dose over a minimum of 6 weeks, we saw incremental increases. It wasn't constant, by the way. So, of course, real data isn't as clean as you'd like it to be, right? You'd like to say, hey, if I'm taking glutathione supplements, I start here, 6 weeks later I'm here, woohoo, my glutathione's going up. What we really found was we started here, and we went and we could see a little of an increase, and then a little bit of flat, and a little increase, then a little fat, and then a little dip on one of the tests, and then it went up. That's real data, but we did see it. So we immediately changed G-cell, and it's the first time you guys are hearing this story, actually. You're the first to hear it. We added the amount of glutathione to the capsule that created this effect. And it started at 200 milligrams per dose, taken every day. We've actually put 250 in there. We didn't see it on any of the other things. And the only thing that we have left to tell you is we couldn't explain the large dose. But it's a single dose, by the way. So you fast and then you come in and you start and you take one giant dose of 3,000 milligrams. And we still, why didn't that show up? Why didn't that show up in the blood? The only thing we can figure at this point, and this is completely hypothetical from the scientists that were involved, is that when you do that to the body, when you superdose something like glutathione to the body, it shuts down everything else. Right? So if we would have captured the blood at the right time, we probably would have seen a bunch, right, for a minute. But having that much glutathione in the bloodstream probably shut down the production of it entirely after that. It probably said every cell in the body is like, whoa, everybody stop working. We got it everywhere, Some guy down the road dumped his glutathione truck, right? Everybody stop making glutathione. That's our theory. Because that published paper, we've all been going off that saying, oh, glutathione's destroyed in the gut. It's not. And now there's more than one paper that have reproduced those. So we have adjusted G-cell to reflect clinically that. So G-cell is now different. That's the first thing. So that's formula number one. Formula number two, Vista 1 and 2. What is Vista used for? Membranes. How does a cell maintain its homeostasis with its environment? Through the membrane. How do you maintain your homeostasis with your environment? Through this shell of a skin, right? And all the orifices and stuff that connect to the environment. This is your membrane. Your skin and your eyes is your membrane. And if it's damaged or if anything's wrong with your membrane, one, you spill out, which is not a good thing. Or two, things get in, which is also not a good thing, correct? Your cell suffers the same struggle. Every cell needs to be well maintained to be healthy, to create a dynamic environmental energy. I know some of you in this room love the idea of energy. A cell is a little ball of energy, and how that energy transports back and forth and throughout its organelles is via membranes. Membranes make it all possible. You can't make ATP without the membrane in the mitochondria. You can't protect your DNA without the nuclear membrane. You can't do a lot of things without membrane. In fact, you can't sense the world around you. Every sensation you feel happens because of a membrane. When my word hits your ear and transfers that message to your brain, it all happened through membranes, through synapses. Membranes are critical to this process. And guess what else? I just mentioned the word synapses. Everything that is moving, electrons move. Electrons move throughout your body constantly. There's been a number of TV shows made or movies made about how our future, we are all going to become batteries for some cybernetic system, right? Multiple movies have been made of that we will become batteries for them because we make so much electricity. We're full of electricity. And to even start thinking about that, when you walk around on the carpet and pull up the extra electrons off of the plastic because they don't hold on electrons very well, and you shock people. Remember doing that as a kid? Across the classroom floor, and you're, hey, don't do that. And you're like 5. I love doing that to people. Electrons are given up really easily by plastic, right? They don't hang on to them very much. You do. Again, I'm going to remind you guys that the idea of redox potential is the sharing of electrons. That's all it is. To make ATP, you move multiple electrons from sugar or fat onto adenosine triphosphate. That's all you're doing. Adenosine triphosphate gets burned by your muscle or your brain or your heart, and it moves those electrons into the next step. And it's just a sharing of electrons. That's all we're talking about here. We want formulas that help you share electrons. That's what redox potential is. Oxidation and reduction is the sharing of electrons. The oxidized people give up electrons. The reduced people get to keep electrons. So if I give you a gift, I've become oxidized, you've become reduced. And then if you give her a gift, same thing happens. That's redox reactions. Now, I want my gift back. So by the time my gift gets back to Dawn, I want him to bring it back up here to me. And we can start the process over. You can enjoy my gift for a few minutes. Okay? But your body starts the process over. So the gift is walking, the gift is thinking, the gift is eating. My gift is the electrons come from me to my next organ, to the next, then it comes back to me again, and we start that over. And we do that 1,000,000,000 times a second in your body. And those are the gifts that keep going. Electrons, we share electrons with all of our cells and tissues. So how do we want to support all that? Well, one, G cell, I told you that supports the redox reactions throughout the tissues to protect them. So G cell glutathione is a protector of the redox reactions. Think of it as the protector. When G cell's there, it keeps those reactions in more balance, because if you, meaning because I gave you my gift first, if you decided to give it to her instead of her, okay, I'm not happy with that. Neither are you. We're both unhappy. But if glutathione comes in and makes sure the gift goes back to you, now glutathione's our protector of the gift of electrons, okay? That's where glutathione plays. Gives it back to who needs it and doesn't let it go off the rails because she's already got a gift. She doesn't need one. She's being greedy. So G cell does that. Vista, the membranes. Everything, electrons have to be transported through membranes. The gifts go through membranes. We have to be really careful to manage that carefully, because if a membrane is broken, then it's literally like pouring the contents out of the battery. It no longer will work. You have to keep it in its shell in order for it to work. Membranes make that possible. So membranes are critical at keeping things compartmentalized so that you can share electrons. Membranes help you do that. Sinulin, epic, and bind. Okay, these are all I would call subset. Remember how we talked about primary redox things? Now I want to come back. The following one, by the way, this one, I want you to move this one to the top of this page. I don't know why I didn't. I want to put ROX right in here. ROX is critical for it acts like G cell, but it uses plants that have amazing abilities to manage electrons, redox potential. So I thought it came over on my slide. It didn't. I want ROX in here. So the top three, G cell, ROX, and Vista 1 and 2 are critical. Next is epic. So I'm making you reorganize these things. Epic needs to go up one. Scooch down, sinulin. Epic goes up. Those four formulas are designed around redox reactions, essentially, in one way, shape, or form. Okay? G cells, glutathione. ROX is plant-based. We call them antioxidants, but honestly, start using the word redox balance. Redox balance. Because some things in those formulas will be antioxidants, but other things are almost oxidizing because they're called reducing. Okay? And vice versa. So I don't want to use the term antioxidants anymore. I think it's oversimplified. It's overused. People have abused it. Drink this drink. And in fact, so many people were eating so many antioxidants. A while ago, I used to coin a phrase called reductive stress, because that's the opposite of oxidative stress, reductive stress. If you give a cell, if I take a bunch of cells out of your brain and put them in a petri dish and flood it with antioxidants, what do you think I do to the mitochondria? I shut it down. Those cells die. So antioxidants have a place in the redox world when they're playing fair with the gifts. But if the antioxidant is the person in the room that's hanging on to all the gifts we keep giving, they become reductive stress. They're hanging on to too much. Antioxidants can actually take you too far down that path. So if someone's eating antioxidants, drinking antioxidants, infusing antioxidants, please pull them to the side and say, stop. You're going too far. You're going to start having symptoms of oxidative stress called reductive stress. It's too much. You need it to be in balance. Oxidative reactions have to happen to make ATP. Reductive reactions happen to reset you and make you clean again. But they have to happen back and forth, back and forth. If you're constantly antioxidizing, you're going to shut it down. It's called reductive stress. Okay. The things that help balance stress, by the way, is this protocol. This protocol helps balance oxidative stress, in case you're wondering. But back to the redox reaction. So I want epic up here, and I want rocks up here. What are the differences between rocks and epic? Rocks are plant-based redox beneficial compounds, all plant-based. And many of them are not beneficial because they're antioxidants. They're beneficial because they turn genes on and off in the body. They turn on oxidative or reductive genes. They turn on things like NRF2. You guys heard of that? They turn on things like sirtuins. Those are another group that they can turn on, okay? So they work in different ways, not just as a compound. They work in speaking to your DNA. One, that's rocks. Epic is what I call a metabolic antioxidant. That came about because of a no cycle issue that we all have. We won't have time for it today. It's on the chart, by the way, the chart I gave you. It's on that chart. That redox reaction is metabolic, meaning that they're not oxidative radicals coming into your body from your environmental sources, like all the toxins, etc. These are things that are happening inside your cell that you do yourself, meaning that you create nitric oxide as a hormone. Nitric oxide is an amazing hormone. Vasodilates, turns on other hormones, etc. However, if nitric oxide is produced and you don't have all the nutrients there, like BH4, you create something called peroxynitrate. You guys heard that? That's the no cycle, don't have time. But suffice it to say, those are called metabolic issues. That means your own body is working against you because it doesn't have the tools it needs to take care of it. Epic is there to help those metabolic cycles. So it's called a metabolic antioxidant or a metabolic redox balancing formula. Does that make sense? The other one's for external oxidative or redox stresses. Epic is for internal, things that happen inside your cells, particularly in things like liver or highly metabolic cells that are constantly driving the energy. It's important for those. That's epic. Is that clear? Internal, external is another way of thinking of it. Even though they cross over, there's a lot of crossover. Sinulin and bind. Sinulin is a metabolic, but it just so happens that there's a lot of ingredients in sinulin that work metabolically by managing redox reactions in a positive way. That's why I included it. So it's a third tier. So bind and sinulin are the third tier. Those are replaceable. If you don't have a metabolic issue, but you have a neurological, you can go to the neurological things. If you don't have a metabolic issue and you have an adrenal issue, replace sinulin with GA and so on. Sinulin's replaceable and so is bind. Bind is a scavenger of compounds in the GI. When you take bind, it stays in the GI tract, but it scavenges things that can impact redox reactions. Waste products. You produce a lot of waste. You also get rid of waste that you're exposed to. That waste is harmful even while it's going through you. So you want to bind it up. Bind is there to scavenge the waste that you're excreting so you don't reabsorb it as well. You guys have heard of reabsorption? Right? That can be a problem. So bind is there to continue that redox process all the way into the toilet, all the way into the waste treatment, where there are algae that has other good ways to treat your waste can deal with it. And the algae is very well equipped to do that. That's the protocol. So the redox protocol, I want to reiterate, G-Cell, ROX, Vista, Epic, and then the other ones are not Epic, but these two you can replace and play with, and whether it be GA or thyroid or spleen, whatever you're working on. Remember, this is a protocol within a protocol. So everything else you hear this weekend are going to be the larger protocols. My protocols go inside that because methylation and redox potentials impact every cell in the body at some level. And that's why I decided to choose those two topics today. Okay, now we have a little bit of time for questions.
Good morning.
Morning.
I have a patient who is MTFHR, has that problem. And when we do nutrition response testing, muscle testing on her, she'll go on G-cell, off G-cell, on G-cell, off G-cell, on Moors, off Moors. Can you explain maybe why that happens or?
Why they seem to be having to be alternating?
Yes.
Now, do they do them at the same time? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So they're probably what we call heterozygous. So they have one genetic defect and the other one's healthy. Most people are hetero, means that you got it from your mom or dad. One of your mom or dad gave you the MTHFR defect. Homozygous is a little more rare, but if it's hetero, what you'll find is depending on when things get depleted, are they male or female? Female. So remember, estrogen is one of the drivers of methylation and other hormones. And so what could happen is there's going to be a demand for methylation and then not a demand and then demand and not a demand. So you might be picking up on those cyclical pieces. You can also see that in their sleep and wake cycles. So if people struggle with sleep cycles, they're generally methyl depleted for the most part. And they start sleeping better. But if it starts cycling again, they're testing for it at those times. What you can do in the interim, like say you're up and down on a cycle, what you guys can play with, or what I would do protocol-wise, is some people can cycle with methylation demand and use. I would say that if you can find any rhythm in their world as you meet with them and find when their rhythms are higher and lower, could be their job, could be their other stressors in their life that are contributing to these peaks and valleys. Dose, you can try to dose down the middle, or you can cycle the dose as well, right? You can dose around the cycles. A lot of things are rhythmic. More things are rhythmic than we used to think. What's taught me that is the microbiome world. It's taught me that we're in a much more of a rhythm than we want to acknowledge. In fact, we should start thinking about people as rhythms, right? They are going to be in a rhythm at any given time, and we're in rhythm with nature. We live at this latitude. We have rhythms in our environment. We have a winter, a spring, a summer, and a fall. So by definition, people that live here, we have a rhythmic diet because of that. And people that first lived here had a rhythmic diet. And so I think we need to keep thinking more along the lines of helping them. But at some level, at some basic level, there's going to be a rhythm, just like everything else in our lives, right? Females have rhythms. Females have a 28-day rhythm. Males have I think it's a 20-minute rhythm. I'm not even kidding. That's real. There's this amazing researcher. She works on male hormones and male rhythms, and we're like a 20-minute rhythm. We go through PMS every 20 minutes. I mean, we're crazy, right? It's really funny to listen to her. She's a great speaker, and she studies male hormones, and our hormones will go up and down. And now, you women that live with men have seen that, right? Whoa, whoa, you can see the rhythms can really be crazy throughout the day. So we're actually more we're more high maintenance really in the end. But we know about this. There's lunar rhythms. There's the microbiome goes through rhythm, by the way. We now know the microbiome rhythm. We have a circadian rhythm. There's a lot of things. So sometimes, if anything, when you're thinking about methylation and redox, at least those two, think about the rhythm that they might be in. There's days during the day that they're way more oxidative potential. There's time during the day that they're much more reduced potential, and you can really manage that.
So I'm intrigued by what you said about the glutathione when you megadose and then it tells the other cells to not produce. So is that just for glutathione or is that for other nutrients as well? And where does IV drip and megadosing supplements fit into that?
It's a great question. We just came up with that because we couldn't understand the data, right? People were getting this other data like us showing that you can incrementally increase it. And it didn't increase necessarily like you'd think. There was this almost like a teaching event where the cells would get better and better at making glutathione even if you were supplementing it. And the megadose just abolished that. So we thought it's got to be that the body's like, whoa, everybody, slow down. The truck tipped over on the road and all this glutathione spilled everywhere. I do think it can work with other nutrients. Glutathione is regulated differently than something like ascorbic acid. So ascorbic acid is really, really soluble. So when I megadose ascorbic acid with people, and you guys may have done this yourself, that peaks at 2 hours and then quickly gets eliminated. So 6 hours into a megadose of ascorbic acid, it's gone. You've peed it into the toilet. Very little of it's retained. Glutathione's different. It's retained longer. Some of the other blood work we did following people, so we looked at ascorbic acid, that's up and down because it's so soluble. The kidney just pushes it out, right? It's dehydroascorbate. It's just gone. And that's why you want to keep eating it, right? It doesn't live long in your body. It's highly used and secreted. You can build, you can recycle it to some degree. It's actually used to recycle glutathione. Ascorbic acid recycles glutathione. It's one of the pathways you can find. Minerals, however, on the other hand, are slow like glutathione. They build up. So I noticed when we supplement minerals, they kind of build up. So we have adjusted some of our formulas to be smaller doses, you might have noticed, in some minerals because they don't get secreted as quickly. They stick around, meaning that you don't want to build up too many and become, have an issue like copper. You don't want to build up copper. Copper's been implicated in Alzheimer's. It's found in the plaques. So you want copper to be maintained at a very reasonable, healthy level. You don't want it to build up over time. Not a good thing. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. It's a great question, and I think as we look at this more, we'll learn more about those kinds of things. Yeah.
We have time for one more question. So I'll just remind you, we do have a speaker panel, and we also have more time at the end of the afternoon or evening for Q&A. So if you have questions also, or grab him at a break or any of our speakers at a break, but also just make sure that you note your question. And if we don't get to it, just due to time, then we'll get to them, okay? So just make sure that you write them down.
My question was revolving around the carnitine, and was curious as far as great resources or where to get that. Do you guys have anything like that? Understanding how that could potentially help someone get into ketosis to help regulate hormones or whatever. Are there some good insight there as far as places we can get that supplement for people?
That's a great question. Now, we use carnitine in a number of these formulas, like e-energy, because we know it's an energy molecule, so it shows up at reasonable doses, in the milligram ranges, 50, 100 milligrams, because that's what has been studied at the cellular level. For people going into ketosis and this idea that carnitine can be a contributing factor to benefit, it's so new. I don't know how many people have tried it. I personally haven't tried it. I just started hearing about it in the ketosis world. There may be, if you get onto some of those people that are deeply following the ketosis world, you might get more in there. But I personally don't have any beyond that. Carnitine's an easy one to come by, though. So we use it in our complex supplements, but you can get carnitine straight. I think there's capsules of carnitine, just straight up. You need those to try it. But you're right, I don't have a lot more than that. That just during my research, I came across that during the methylation pathways because there's a number of precursor methylators like lysine and the oxoglutarate that are methylated. They're not the final product like carnitine or creatine. Those are downstream, but all the methylation is taken up upstream. So if you supplement them, you're not having to use the methyl groups up here. And that's really where that came into play for me.
Awesome. Let's give him one more big round of applause, everybody.